Hey guys, tonight, let's drift back a few centuries to a place where the nights smelled of salt and wood smoke, and the mornings came with the cry of gulls instead of alarm clocks. Before we start, tell me where you listening from, and what time is it where you are? I always like knowing which oceans or cities my voice reaches. It's like sending a bottle into the sea, never knowing on which shore it will wash up. Now close your eyes. Imagine a small Caribbean village at dawn. The roofs are patched with palm leaves. The air is heavy with humidity and the faint, sweet rot of fruit. Nets are stretched out on racks like cobwebs, drying from the night's work. The sea is right there, so close that even while you sleep, it feels as if it's breathing beneath your window. That's where I was born. My name was Mateo Reyes, though back then, names didn't mean much. The sea knew me by other sounds, by the scrape of my bare feet on its rocks, the splash of my mother's buckets, the laugh I tried to hide when I skipped work at the docks. The first pirate I ever saw wasn't what I expected. He didn't wear black or gold, no shining cutlass, no parrot screaming curses. He was an old man sitting outside the tavern, with one leg shorter than the other, and a necklace made of shark teeth. He didn't drink like the others. He just watched the horizon, mumbling to himself. Some said he'd been part of a crew that vanished after burning a Spanish galleon near Dominica. Some said he'd buried his treasure and gone mad trying to find it again. To me, he looked peaceful, like someone who'd already lived 10 lives and didn't care which one he was in anymore. I used to bring him pieces of bread in exchange for stories. He'd tell me about islands that never appeared on maps, of storms that spoke in voices, of captains who could calm the wind by whispering in Latin. When I was 12, a merchant ship anchored near our bay. Its sails were so big they looked like mountains of cloth. The crew shouted in languages I didn't know, French, English, a bit of Dutch maybe. I spent the whole day hiding among the barrels at the dock, listening. The world felt enormous, and I was standing on its doorstep. My father had died at sea. People in the village said the sea was a jealous lover. It always took more than it gave. But I never saw it that way. I thought maybe it just wanted people brave enough to meet it halfway. That night I couldn't sleep. The waves outside were calm, but I felt something moving beneath them, as if the sea itself was turning over, waiting. I looked out the window, and in the moonlight, I could see the reflection of the ship anchored offshore. Tiny lights flickered across its deck, like fireflies trapped in a wooden cage. I remember thinking, they'll be gone by morning, and if I don't move now, I'll never see what's beyond that line where the stars touch the water. I left home before dawn. No goodbyes, just the sound of the door creaking and the smell of my mother's herbs hanging in the air. I carried nothing but a coil of rope and a little brass button I'd found on the sand, a token I believed would bring luck. The dock was quiet except for the creak of mooring lines. The merchant ship towered above me, its hull black and wet with dew. A sailor on watch snored near a lantern, his hat pulled over his eyes. I held my breath, stepped onto the rope ladder, and climbed. The wood felt alive beneath my hands, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the tide. The deck was littered with coils of rope, stacked barrels, and the smell. Gods, the smell, tar, salt, citrus, and something animal, like sweat baked into oak. I hid behind a crate as the first bells rang for morning watch. A young sailor passed, yawning, rubbing his eyes. When he saw me, he froze. Just a boy in a torn shirt, covered in dock dust. For a moment, I thought he'd shout, but instead he grinned. "You here to work or to steal?" he whispered. "Work," I said, though I wasn't sure what that meant yet. He nodded toward the ropes. "Then start there. Captain wakes soon." And that's how it began. No ceremony, no destiny, no dramatic lightning strike. Just a quiet morning on a nameless dock, a boy climbing onto a ship that wasn't his, and a crew too tired to care. We sailed by noon. My village shrank behind us until it looked like a handful of sand dropped on the horizon. I thought of my mother, the old pirate by the tavern, the stories he told about storms that whispered names. I wondered if the sea would remember mine. The first night aboard, the sky opened, 1,000 stars, sharp as broken glass. The sailors lay on deck when their shifts ended, staring up, talking about the ports they'd seen: Havana, Port Royal, Cartagena. I listened quietly, memorizing each name. Then, just before I drifted to sleep, I heard the bosun mutter to another man, "They say pirates are back in the Windward Passage. Took a sugar ship last week." The other spat overboard. "Bah, stories. No one's mad enough to cross the Spanish now." But I remember the way the sea breathed that night, deep and slow, like a beast stirring under the dark. And I thought, maybe someone still is. The first thing you learn at sea is that nothing ever stays still. Not the ship, not your stomach, not even your thoughts. The deck rolls beneath you, and it feels like the earth itself has forgotten what it means to be solid. On that merchant ship, the days began before the sun and ended long after it sank. The bell would ring, sharp and metallic, echoing through the damp air, and men would rise from their hammocks like ghosts called from the grave. You'd hear groans, coughing, the slap of bare feet on wet planks. No one spoke much in the mornings. Words were as heavy as the ropes we had to haul. I didn't have a place to sleep. For the first few nights, I lay between barrels near the stern, listening to the creak of timbers and the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. The ship seemed to breathe, to shift in its sleep like some wooden animal. Every sound meant something. A sigh in the sails could warn of wind. A dull crack in the planks might mean trouble brewing below. They called me boy. Not Mateo, not even lad, just boy. Boy, fetch this. Boy, scrub that. My hands bled from hauling ropes. My back ached from scrubbing the deck until it gleamed like dark glass. The salt water stung every cut, but after a while, I stopped noticing. The sea teaches you which pains to care about and which to forget. The ship carried barrels of sugar, tobacco, and rum bound for Jamaica, maybe beyond. The crew said it was owned by a London company, but most of us couldn't read the name painted on the crates. All that mattered was that the captain's word was law, and law had sharp teeth. His name was Gallo, a tall man with a voice that could cut through storms. He wore his beard trimmed to a single point and carried a cane more often than a sword. though everyone knew the cane's silver knob hid a dagger inside. The first time I saw someone punished, it was for stealing rum. They tied the sailor to the mainmast and lashed him until the deck glistened red. The wind carried the smell of blood across the ship, mixing with salt and tar. Nobody looked away, because the captain didn't allow it. "Every man must witness the cost," he said calmly, as though explaining a math problem. That night, the ship was quiet. Even the usual laughter faded. I sat on the forecastle with a handful of biscuits so hard I could have used them as weapons. Beside me, an older sailor named Harp chewed slowly, staring at nothing. "You think that's cruel, boy?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. He smiled without humor. "Then you'll fit in fine here. Not knowing is how you survive." Days turned to weeks. The sea never changed, and yet it changed constantly. Green one morning, blue by noon, black by night. Sometimes dolphins followed our wake, sometimes sharks. Once, after a storm, we pulled a drowned man from the water, bloated and pale, his clothes torn to ribbons. The boatswain ordered his pockets searched. When they found nothing but a small wooden cross, they threw him back. At night, the men told stories. Not the grand kind you'd expect. No treasure hunts or heroics. Just fragments of places. One spoke of a tavern in Port Royal where the rum burned like fire but cured any sickness. Another said he'd seen an island where parrots mimicked gunfire so perfectly that ships sometimes fired at the trees. But there were darker stories too, of men who turned to piracy not for gold but for revenge. One tale was about a captain who'd lost his family to a Spanish raid. He hunted ships for years, carving a mark into every hull he sank. Some said he vanished after finding his enemies and burning them alive inside their own galleon. Others whispered he still sailed, a ghost ship with a crew of the dead. I didn't know what to believe, but the stories filled the nights with a strange electricity. They made the sea feel infinite, a stage for every cruelty, every dream. Then came the storm. It rose without warning. Just a sudden shift in the air, a smell like metal, and a low, endless rumble. The sky collapsed into itself, and rain hammered the deck with such force it felt like the heavens were trying to drown us. We tied ourselves to the railings, shouting into the roar. Waves as tall as towers slammed the hull, sending water cascading down the gunnels. I saw one man swept overboard. The light from his lantern spun once before vanishing into black water. I remember the captain on the quarterdeck, cloak whipping in the wind, shouting orders none of us could hear. The masts groaned, the sails tore like paper, and for a moment the ship tilted so far I thought we'd go under. But somehow it didn't. The helmsman clung to the wheel, eyes wide, teeth bared like an animal. When dawn finally came, the sea was calm again. Calm in that eerie, after-battle way, as if the world had taken a long, exhausted breath. We'd lost 3 men and a sail. One of the crew muttered that the storm was a curse, that someone aboard had angered the sea. No one argued. It was easier to believe in curses than bad luck. That afternoon, while patching ropes, I noticed a small object tangled in the rigging. A piece of fabric, torn and salt stiff, with a faint design on it. At first, I thought it was part of a sail, but as I pulled it free, I saw it was something else entirely. A scrap of black cloth with the faint outline of a skull and crossed bones, faded by sun and rain. I froze. Couldn't be real, not on a merchant ship. And yet there it was, fluttering weakly in the wind, as if some ghost had left it there for me to find. The sea has a way of pretending it's asleep. Days will pass in silence. The air so still it feels like the world's been forgotten. And then, without warning, it wakes up hungry. We were somewhere south of Hispaniola when the wind began to die. The sails hung limp, the waves flattened, and the sun became a white, merciless coin nailed to the sky. For 2 days we drifted, sweating, the deck too hot to walk on barefoot. The crew grew restless. Food was fine, water was measured, but silence is the worst kind of hunger. It eats the mind first. That's when I first saw it. A dark line on the horizon, small and patient. At first, I thought it was a trick of light, one of those distant mirages sailors whisper about. But the line grew larger. A shape, then 2 masts, then 3. A ship. The man in the crow's nest shouted. The bell rang. Captain Gallo appeared within moments, cane in hand, squinting into the glare. "Spanish?" someone asked. "Worse," said Harp beside me. His face had gone pale. "Look there. See the way she rides the swell? No merchant ship moves like that." The newcomer was fast, too fast. Within an hour, she'd closed half the distance. Her hull was low, sleek and black, with sails patched from every color of canvas, as if stitched from the skins of other ships. Through the spyglass, I saw figures climbing the rigging with inhuman speed. And then, faint but unmistakable, a flag rising above the mainmast, black with white bone markings. The crew froze. Some muttered prayers, others curses. One man simply sat down and laughed until he cried. "Pirates!" Captain Gallo barked orders, "Load the guns, prepare grape shot, arm the Marines." But the truth was written on every face. We were slower, heavier, and badly manned. Merchant ships weren't built for fighting. They were built for carrying. The pirate ship came on like a storm. You could hear the creak of its timbers over the wind, the rhythmic crack of drums to keep the rowers time. They fired one warning shot, a cannonball that screamed past our bow and vanished into the sea. A second shot shattered the mainmast flag. Gallo's jaw tightened. "Ready yourselves," he said quietly. "We hold them off until nightfall." But night didn't wait for anyone. The pirates struck like sharks. Grappling hooks whirled through the air, biting into our rails. Lines went taut. Men shouted. Then they came swinging across the gap, shouting in every tongue imaginable. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning powder. I remember confusion more than fear. Flashes of faces, blades, hands pushing, pulling. A man fell beside me, his eyes wide, blood blooming on his chest like spilled wine. I ducked behind a barrel, clutching a belaying pin as if it were a sword. The deck was chaos. Screams, fire, rain of splinters, and then silence. Just like that, it was over. When I dared to look up, the pirates were everywhere. Weapons drawn but calm now, moving through the wreckage like collectors at a market. Our captain stood at the quarterdeck, disarmed, blood trickling from his temple. The pirate who faced him wasn't what I expected. He was young, maybe 30, with sunburned skin, a neat coat of faded blue, and a single gold ring in his ear. His hair was tied back, and when he spoke, his voice was low, smooth. "Captain Gallo," he said in English tinged with French. "You'll forgive the intrusion. We're in need of supplies." "You're thieves," Gallo spat. The man smiled faintly. "Thieves take without asking." "I'm asking." There was a strange dignity in him. Even the way his men moved, precise, deliberate, not the drunken savages the stories promised. They called him Captain Vanishes. Later, I'd learn he was a former privateer who'd turned outlaw when peace ruined his profits. They stripped our ship of cargo, rum, sugar, weapons, charts, but they didn't kill without reason. A few who resisted were bound, not butchered. When they found me hiding behind the barrel, I expected death. Instead, one of them tossed me a water skin and said, "Drink, little ghost. You look half drowned already." The pirate captain noticed me as I stood, shaking, trying to speak. "You're no sailor," he said. I am now," I stammered. He studied me for a moment. A brave answer, or a foolish one. Then he turned to his crew. "We could use another deckhand. This boy's got more salt in his eyes than fear. What do you say?" Gallo lunged forward. "He's mine. My crew." Vanishes tilted his head. "Your crew? They're free men, are they not?" He looked back at me. "What say you, Mateo Reyes? Do you stay with this fine gentleman and his chains? Or do you try a life where the only law is the sea?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of the old man from my village, of his stories, of the way he'd stared at the horizon as if something out there still owed him an answer. I thought of Gallo's whip, of the endless scraping and shouting, of the way every sunrise looked the same. My mouth was dry, but I spoke anyway. "I'll go with you." The words felt heavier than the world. Gallo cursed, but no one stopped me. The pirates lowered a boat, and I climbed down into it. As we rowed away, I looked back once. The merchant ship stood wounded, sails torn, its crew silent as ghosts. Captain Gallo's figure was small, almost pitiful against the fading light. The pirate ship loomed ahead, its hull glistening with salt and battle scars. As I climbed aboard, someone clapped my shoulder. "Welcome to La Tempête," they said, the storm. The deck smelled of sweat, oil, and something wild, freedom, maybe, or madness. Around me, men laughed, sang, patched wounds. The sky burned orange. The sea glittered red. When the first dawn broke over La Tempête, I woke to the smell of burning pitch and frying salt pork. The sky above was pale gold, the sea like glass, and for a brief moment, it felt as though the world had been reset. I was no longer a stowaway or a servant. I was a pirate, though I didn't yet know what that meant. The deck was alive. Men worked in rhythm, their movements quick and practiced. There was laughter, rough, hoarse laughter that sounded nothing like the cold discipline of Captain Gallo's ship. Even the curses carried a kind of music, No one barked orders here. Not exactly. The quartermaster, a man called Dyer, with tattoos curling up his neck like vines, shouted suggestions, and somehow everyone obeyed. It was chaos, but it moved like a dance. Keep your hands busy and your mouth shut, Dyer told me. That's the way to stay alive. By midday, the sun was blazing, and the captain gathered us all on deck. It was the first time I saw him not as a silhouette in smoke, but as a man made of contradictions. The sharp precision of a soldier mixed with the unbuttoned ease of a tavern rogue. He stood before us holding a sheet of parchment. "These are our articles," he said, "the rules of La Tempête. You follow them, and you'll find more justice here than in any king's navy." The crew fell silent. The wind tugged gently at the parchment as he read. Article 1. Every man has an equal vote in affairs of moment. Article 2. Every man shall have an equal share of provisions and strong drink. Article 3. Theft from another crewman shall be punished by marooning. Article 4. Cowardice in battle is death. Article 5. Every man may speak his grievance before the quartermaster and be heard without fear. As he read, the men nodded, some solemn, some grinning. The captain lowered the parchment. "These rules aren't about kindness," he said. "They're about survival. We have no masters here, no crowns, no owners. But without order, freedom rots into chaos. Do you understand that?" I did, or I thought I did. The ceremony ended with a toast. The rum burned like fire and honey. They shouted to the sea, to luck, to storms, to women, to gods that none of them believed in. The laughter echoed across the water. Later, Dyer showed me my bunk, a hammock in a corner below deck, near the gunpowder room. The air was thick with tar and the smell of men who'd lived too long without dry land. Rats scurried overhead, bold and fat. I learned quickly that food had to be tied up high, or they'd gnaw through anything softer than oak. Meals were a strange kind of democracy. We all ate the same: salted beef, hardtack, dried peas when fortune smiled. The cook spiced everything with pepper or rum, mostly to hide the rot. On calm days, we fished, tossing lines overboard and cooking whatever we caught right on deck. There was work, endless work. Mending sails, polishing brass, cleaning guns, patching leaks. But there was laughter too, and music. Harp, who'd somehow survived the battle and joined us by choice, found an old fiddle and played at night. The songs were crude and sad all at once. Stories of women, storms, and bad decisions. Sometimes the men danced, barefoot and wild, the deck thudding under their steps. I learned their language, a mix of English, French, Spanish, and curses that belonged to no country at all. They came from everywhere. Escaped slaves, deserters, shipwrecked sailors, criminals, dreamers. Some had been carpenters or bakers once. Others had never known any life but this. Each carried a story, usually half true, half boast. One evening, while I scrubbed the deck beside a man named Augustine, a tall Haitian with scars like lightning down his arms, he told me something I never forgot. "We sail under a black flag," he said, "but that doesn't make us devils. It makes us honest. The world calls us criminals, but it's the kings and traitors who spill the most blood. We only take what they stole first. I asked if he believed that. He smiled. I have to. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. The more time I spent aboard, the more I realized that piracy wasn't chaos. It was a fragile kind of democracy balanced on a knife's edge. When someone broke the articles, justice was swift and public. One night, a man named Briggs was caught hoarding coins from the last raid. They brought him on deck, the moonlight shining on his pale face. The crew voted, not shouted, voted on his fate. The verdict was unanimous. Marooning. At dawn, we set him ashore on a small quay with a jug of water and a pistol. He didn't beg, didn't cry. He just looked at us as we rowed away and said, "Better to die alone than chained like a dog." His voice was steady, and somehow that made it worse. That night, no one sang. The next morning, Captain Vanishing called me to his cabin. The walls were lined with maps and oddities. A compass made of bone, a tooth from a shark, a rosary twisted into knots. He poured 2 cups of coffee, black and bitter. "You're quiet," he said. "That's rare among men here." "I'm listening," I said. "Good. The sea doesn't love fools who talk too much." He studied me. "Tell me, do you think we're evil?" I hesitated. "I think you're free." He smiled faintly. "Freedom and evil often sleep in the same bed. Remember that." Outside, the wind shifted. I could hear the sails fill and the ship lean into it. We'd been drifting west for 3 weeks, sailing beneath skies that felt like stretched silk, smooth, endless, and deceptively kind. The days blurred together. Salt, sweat, repairs, laughter. But the wind changed on the 4th week, and with it came a mood that moved through the crew like a fever. The Santa Lucia was near. We'd heard of her in every port. A floating fortress bound for Cadiz, laden with New World silver, sugar, and tobacco. Spanish-built, high-sided, and escorted by 2 armed sloops. She'd left Cartagena under heavy guard, but storms had scattered her escorts. That's when Captain Vanishing saw his chance. We spent days in silence, trailing her from a distance. At night, we doused every lantern and covered polished metal to keep from flashing light. The stars watched quietly as we slipped through the waves like a dark thought. I'd never seen the crew so still. No songs, no jokes, no brawls. Just eyes fixed on the horizon. The air smelled of gunpowder, sweat, and something else. Fear, maybe, though no one would admit it. Harp tuned his fiddle one night, but didn't play. He said it was bad luck to make music before a raid. Augustine whispered a prayer in Creole, touching a charm he wore around his neck. A small bone wrapped in red cloth. Even Dyer, who usually barked at everyone, moved like a shadow. At dawn on the 6th day, the lookout's voice cracked the quiet. "Sail to the east." I scrambled up the shrouds. The sun was still rising, bleeding orange into the waves, and there, cutting across the light, was the Santa Lucia. Her hull gleamed like gold, her sails proud and full. She moved slowly, heavy with treasure and glory. The captain's eyes narrowed. "She's alone." Dyer grinned. "Then she's ours." Orders rippled across the deck. Sails trimmed, guns loaded, powder measured with care. The ship came alive, humming with purpose. I worked beside the gunners, my heart hammering so loud it felt like another drumbeat among theirs. The plan was simple and suicidal. We'd approach from the sun's direction so their lookouts would be blinded, fire a broadside into her stern, then close for boarding before she could bring her cannons around. "Quick and close," Venos said. "If we give her distance, we're dead." As we neared, the air grew thick, electric. I could see the Spanish sailors running along their decks, the glint of armor, the frantic movement of hands. Then came the first thunder, their warning shot. The sea exploded near our bow, sending spray high into the air. Venos didn't flinch. "Hold your fire." The men waited, jaws clenched, hands trembling on ropes and triggers. The galleon loomed larger, her flag snapping, her figurehead shining like a saint's crown. I could see faces now, pale and desperate. "Now!" the captain roared. Our cannons answered. The sound shattered the morning. The deck jumped under my feet as smoke rolled across everything. The smell, burning powder, wet rope, and the strange sweetness of destruction filled my lungs. I loaded shot after shot, barely hearing the shouted orders. The Santa Lucia shuddered under the impact. With splintered sails tore, we closed the distance. Grappling hooks flew, lines went taut, men shouted in 3 languages. I swung across last, the world spinning, the sea below flashing like broken glass. The fight was brutal and fast. Steel met steel. Pistols flared in flashes of light. I slipped on blood-slick planks, narrowly avoiding a cutlass that would have opened me from hip to shoulder. Harp went down beside me, his hand clutching a wound that bloomed dark through his shirt. He looked at me and laughed, before pushing me away and shouting for me to run. The Spanish captain fought near the helm, surrounded by his officers. He wore a crimson sash and moved with the grace of a dancer. Venos met him there, and for a moment the chaos around them stilled. Their swords rang like bells. The Spaniard shouted something. A prayer, maybe, or a curse, before Venos disarmed him with a twist and drove his blade into the deck beside his throat. "Yield," Venos said. The man spat blood. "Cowards. Thieves." Venos smiled thinly. "Survivors." The fight was over. Smoke drifted off the water, curling lazily toward the sky. The Santa Lucia groaned, wounded but afloat. We had won. Below deck, the holds gleamed. Chests of silver bars stacked like loaves of bread. Coins spilling like rain from cracked crates. The air smelled of wealth, sharp, metallic, and unreal. Men shouted, laughed, cried. Some prayed. But amid the treasure, I found something else. In a small cabin near the captain's quarters, I stumbled upon a trunk filled not with gold, but with letters, journals, a child's wooden toy, a tiny horse carved from driftwood. I turned it over in my hands and felt a strange pang. Somewhere, a boy had waited for his father to come home. When I brought it to Venos, he stared at it for a long time before taking it gently and placing it on his desk. "Keep it," he said quietly. Remind yourself that silver's never clean. The morning after the raid, the sea was quiet, unnervingly so. It had that strange calm that comes only after chaos, like the world itself was trying to remember how to breathe. The Santa Lucia now drifted behind us, stripped and ghostly, her flag lowered, her decks empty. We had taken everything of worth, even her name, painted over hastily in black tar as if erasing her memory. Our ship, the Marianne, groaned with the new weight of silver. The hull sat lower in the water, and every man aboard walked a little taller, his voice a little louder. Even the wounded smiled through gritted teeth. Victory, I learned, had a sound, the clatter of coins, the creak of casks, the hum of dreams being measured in gold. But Captain Vanishing was silent. He stood on the quarterdeck, coat unbuttoned, eyes scanning the horizon. The sea wind caught his hair, streaked now with more gray than I remembered. There was something distant in his expression, like he could already see the next storm, the next battle, the next ghost that would come for us. By noon, the celebrations began again. Rum flowed, songs rose, and laughter rolled across the deck like thunder. But beneath it all, you could feel the shift, a slow, invisible change, like rot creeping under fresh paint. Men began to count their shares aloud. 38 silver bars for me, one shouted. 42, another corrected. For those who fought on the upper deck, arguments flared, small, harmless at first, then sharper. Greed, it turned out, had no accent. Vanishing called a meeting at dusk. The entire crew gathered, faces still flushed with drink and glory. He stepped forward, boots thudding against the planks, and raised his hand for silence. "Brothers," he began, "we did what few could. We struck the King of Spain himself and lived to sing about it." Cheers erupted, wild, drunken, proud. He let it roll, then spoke again, his tone cutting through the noise. "But victory means nothing without order. You know the code. Every man gets his share, by the marks we agreed before we ever took to sea." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The code, it was sacred, written not on paper but in blood and memory. A pirate's law made not by kings but by the desperate. Vanishing gestured toward a barrel near the mainmast. "The silver stays sealed until morning. Then we divide fair and even." A voice cut through the crowd. Dyer's. "And who decides what's fair, Captain?" The air tensed. Dyer leaned forward, one hand on his sword, the other holding a flask. His eyes gleamed like wet stone. "I risked my neck on the boarding line. I took a blade to the arm for this ship. And yet you stand there, asking us to trust your fairness." The deck went still. Even the sea seemed to hush. Vanishing didn't move. "You'll get your share, Dyer. No more, no less." "And if I think that's not enough?" Dyer asked. Then Vanishing smiled, that cold, careful smile I'd seen before battle. "Then you can take it up with the sea. She's a better judge than I." For a heartbeat, I thought Dyer might draw. The crew's hands twitched toward their weapons. Then, slowly he laughed, sharp, mirthless, and stepped back. "Aye, Captain, the sea it is." Tension broke. but something fragile cracked beneath it. The seed of rebellion had been planted. That night, no one slept. Men whispered in small knots, shadows moving among barrels and sails. I overheard fragments, talk of taking a share early, of sailing to Tortuga, of leaving before the captain lost his edge. I found Harp sitting alone by the forecastle, bandaged and pale. He was tuning his fiddle again, though no sound came from it. "Something's coming," he said without looking up. "A storm?" I asked. "A worse one," he muttered. "The kind made by men." He wasn't wrong. By dawn, the Marian felt different. The air itself seemed heavier. When Vanishes ordered the chests opened, I watched closely, the way the men leaned forward, the way their eyes gleamed. The first few coins clinked like the first drops of rain before a flood. The division began smoothly by rank, by duty. Quartermaster to the boatswain, gunners to deckhands, right down to the cabin boy me. When my turn came, Vanishes handed me a small pouch of silver and a single Spanish coin, worn smooth by time. "For luck," he said. I nodded, though luck seemed like something we'd already spent. Then came Dyer's turn. He stepped forward, grinning, and held out both hands. Vanishes counted his share, then added nothing more. "This it?" Dyer asked. "This is it," the captain said. Dyer stared at the coins, then at Vanishes. "You shorted me." "No," Vanishes said calmly. "You overestimated yourself." The silence that followed was thick as fog. Then, without a word, Dyer swung. The punch landed hard, square on the captain's jaw. Steel flashed. Men shouted. The deck exploded into chaos again. Vanishes staggered, spat blood, then struck back. The fight was fast, brutal, and over before I could blink. The captain caught Dyer's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and drove his dagger up under the man's ribs. Dyer froze, eyes wide, then dropped to his knees. Blood pooled on the planks. Vanishes stepped back, breathing hard. "The code," he said quietly, "is the only thing that keeps us from becoming animals." He turned to the rest. "If any man disagrees, the sea is waiting." No one spoke. They tossed Dyer's body overboard at sunset. The sea closed around him like it always did, indifferent, eternal. The ship sailed on. That night, I stood at the bow, watching the trail of moonlight ripple across the water. Harp joined me, his bandage fresh, his eyes hollow. "He was right, you know," Harp said softly. "Who?" "Both of them." By the time land appeared on the horizon, the Marianne was heavier than ever. Not from the silver, but from everything we carried that couldn't be seen. The blood, the guilt, the glory. The lookout shouted, "Land ho!" One pale morning, and a low, hazy outline emerged from the mist. Jamaica. The island looked almost unreal, like a mirage hovering between sea and sky. The smell reached us first, sweet and heavy, a mix of wet earth, smoke, and distant flowers. After weeks of salt air and tar, it felt almost intoxicating. "Port Royal," Harp murmured beside me, "where God turns a blind eye and the devil keeps the books." He wasn't wrong. As we rounded the headland, the city came into view. A sprawl of crooked streets, leaning houses, and hundreds of ships jammed into the harbor like drunks at a tavern door. Smoke rose from a dozen cook fires and forges. Gulls screamed overhead, diving for scraps. Every kind of vessel was there. Merchantmen, slave ships, privateers, and more than a few flying no flag at all. Even from the deck, you could hear it, the roar of the city. Laughter, music, shouting, the clang of metal, the thud of fists. Port Royal was alive, restless, and utterly unashamed. The Marion eased into harbor, her patched sails flapping like tired lungs. Dockhands shouted orders, ropes flew, and within minutes the smell of rum and spice replaced the endless scent of salt. The men were already restless, eyes shining with the promise of solid ground and soft company. Vanos gathered us before disembarking. His face was stern, though his voice carried that calm authority we all obeyed without question. "Spend your gold how you wish," he said, "but keep your ears open. The governor's patrols have been sniffing after men like us. Too many complaints from the merchants. We keep a low profile, we stay alive." The men nodded, though I knew none of them were listening. Gold has a way of making promises louder than warnings. The docks were chaos. Sailors, merchants, beggars, and women in bright dresses moving through the crush like smoke. I followed Harp into the streets, clutching my small pouch of silver. The cobblestones were slick with spilled rum, and the air was thick with heat and noise. Everywhere I looked, someone was shouting, selling, or singing. We passed taverns that leaned like broken teeth, their signs swinging lazily in the breeze. The Bleeding Gull, the Widow's Alehouse, the Saint's Sin. Inside, laughter burst like cannon fire. Drunken sailors arm-wrestled on tables sticky with ale. Musicians played fiddles that were never in tune but always full of life. "This," Harp said, grinning, "is what hell must sound like." We spent our first night in a place called the King's Mercy, though mercy was the one thing it didn't offer. Rum was cheap, and after the third cup, the world softened. Harp played his fiddle for a crowd. The old songs, sea shanties, laments, and things too haunting to name. Coins clinked into his hat. I sat nearby, watching the faces. Men who'd seen storms, women who'd survived worse, children darting between tables with hands too quick for honesty. Then she walked in. She moved through the crowd like someone who'd been born to be watched. Dark hair tied back, a small scar along her jaw that only made her more striking. She wore no jewels, no pretense. Just a long coat that had once belonged to a man, and eyes that held the calm of a loaded pistol. Someone whispered her name, Isabella Cortez. Rumor said she'd once captained her own ship, a Spanish corsair who turned rogue after being betrayed by her own admiral. Others said she was a smuggler, a spy, a ghost. Whatever she was, when she looked my way, I felt like she could see everything I hadn't said. She stopped beside our table, glanced at Harp, then at me. "You're new," she said in a low voice, accented but sharp. "New enough," I managed. Her eyes flicked to the silver coin hanging around my neck, the one Vanos had given me. "You came in with Vanos's ship." I hesitated. "You know him? Everyone knows him," she said. "And some remember when he still slept at night." Before I could answer, a commotion broke out near the bar. Two sailors were fighting over a woman, fists slamming into wood, mugs flying. The crowd roared, half cheering, half ducking for cover. Isabella didn't even flinch. She just sipped her drink and watched, detached, as one man went crashing through a table. When the noise died down, she leaned closer. "Be careful who you follow," she said. "Port Royal eats men like him and swallows boys like you whole." Then she was gone, lost in the smoke and laughter. That night, long after the tavern emptied and the music faded, I sat outside watching the moon shimmer on the harbor. Ships rocked gently in the dark, their masts like grave markers. I could hear laughter from the brothels, the clink of coins, the distant hum of the city refusing to sleep. Harp joined me, his fiddle quiet for once. "You met her," he said, smirking. "I don't even know what she is." He nodded toward the water. "She's what we all are, something between alive and damned." I looked out at the ships, their lanterns swaying like stars. Somewhere among them, I knew another captain was plotting, another crew was dreaming of silver, and the sea was waiting, always waiting. By dawn, half our crew was gone, vanished into the city's maze. Some would never return. Others would wake in chains or worse. But the Marian still floated in the harbor, and Vanishes was already making new plans. It was said that every ship carried ghosts, but some carried things far worse. When Captain Vanishes pointed to that lonely patch of sea east of Cuba, he did so with the care of a man handling something dangerous, something that might burn him if he spoke too loudly about it. The crew that remained, the ones who hadn't drowned themselves in rum or dice, gathered around the table, the candlelight flickering across their faces. "The San Erasmo," he said, "a Spanish courier, small crew, no cannons worth naming." Harp frowned. "And worth chasing, why?" Vanishes' eyes lifted. "Because she doesn't carry gold. She carries relics." That word lingered in the air, heavy as gunpowder. Relics. Men who'd crossed half the world for silver leaned back at that. You could divide pirates into two kinds: those who believed in curses and those who pretended they didn't. Either way, relics, the bones of saints, the crosses from holy places, the chalices rumored to have touched divine lips, they were bad luck. Holy things had a habit of turning on the unholy. Vanishes saw their unease and smiled. "Don't mistake me for a fool. I'm not chasing ghosts, but the church pays well for its lost trinkets, and the crown pays even more to keep them from being sold. Or burned," Harp muttered under his breath. By dawn, we'd stocked the Marianne and slipped from Port Royal like thieves sneaking out of a dream. The city's lights faded behind us, swallowed by mist. Ahead, the open sea waited calm, but not kind. For the first few days, the wind favored us. The sails bellied full, the water hissed under the keel, and the crew found rhythm again. The air smelled of tar, salt, and something electric, the scent of new danger. At night, Vanishes kept mostly to himself. I'd sometimes see him below deck, poring over maps, scratching notes in a small black journal bound with brass corners. He wrote as if the act itself was a battle. Once, when I passed too close, I caught a glimpse of a name written over and over again in the margins. Cortez. Isabella. I didn't ask, but I wondered. The sixth night brought fog thick, white, and endless. It rolled over the water like a living thing, swallowing sound, light, even the stars. The world shrank to the creak of our timbers and the slow drum of waves. That's when we heard it. A bell, faint at first, then clearer. A hollow ringing, coming from somewhere ahead. We slowed, listening. No ship lights, no voices. Just the bell, tolling steadily, as though calling someone home. Vanos raised his spyglass, then lowered it again. That's her, he said. The San Erasmo. The fog thinned for a heartbeat, and there she was. A small galleon, drifting listlessly, sails torn, hull scarred. No flags, no lanterns, just that bell, swinging gently at her bow. We approached in silence, grappling hooks ready, pistols drawn. The only sound was the faint lapping of water against her sides. Board her, Vanos ordered. The first thing I noticed when my boots hit her deck was the smell. Stale and strange, like rust and incense. The wood was damp, slick with moss in places. Ropes hung loose. Barrels rolled lazily with the swell. But there were no men. Not one. Every hammock below deck was empty. The galley still had half-eaten food, hard as stone. In the captain's cabin, a quill lay snapped beside a bottle of wine, and a chair was overturned. Harp lit a lantern. Its glow brushed something dark on the wall. Symbols, scrawled in what looked like tar but smelled of iron. Latin, Harp said. And bad Latin. What's it say? I asked. He squinted. Lord, deliver us from what was promised. Before I could answer, a sound echoed from the hold. A slow, deliberate knock. Once, twice, 3 times. We froze. Vanos drew his sword, motioning us forward. The cargo bay was sealed with iron bands, the lock old but unbroken. He nodded to Dugan, our carpenter, who pried it open with a crowbar. The hinges groaned. The smell that escaped made my stomach twist, something between rot and perfume. Inside were crates, maybe a dozen, all marked with the royal seal of Spain. Vanos broke one open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a golden chalice studded with gems, its surface etched with writing too fine to read. In another crate, fragments of what looked like bone, bleached white and shaped into a cross. Relics, holy things. And then, at the back, something different. A smaller chest, locked tight, bound with chains instead of rope. The captain ran his hand over it. The metal was warm. Bring it up, he said. We did, carefully. Took 4 men to move it. When we set it on deck, the bell above us rang again, though no one had touched it. Vanos stared at the chest for a long time before turning to us. We take it, he said. All of it. No questions. Harp stepped forward. Captain, if this ship's cursed. She's abandoned, Vanos snapped. The curse was in their cowardice, not their cargo. He looked at me. You believe in curses, Mateo? I hesitated. I believe the sea keeps its debts. He smiled faintly. Then pray we're not in hers. We set sail at once, leaving the San Erasmo to drift back into the fog. But that night, no one slept easy. The ship felt different, heavier, slower. The air thickened. The timbers creaked like whispers. And below deck, though the chest never moved, sometimes it sounded as if something inside it did. For 3 days, the wind vanished. Not slowed, not shifted, vanished. The sails hung limp, pale and useless against a sky that refused to move. The ocean turned to a sheet of gray glass, smooth as polished stone. Even the waves seemed to hold their breath. No crests, no rhythm, just stillness. At first, the men joked about it. "The sea's tired," one said. "She's resting." But by the second day, the laughter had dried up. The heat was merciless. It pressed down on us like an invisible hand, heavy and constant. The air shimmered. Skin burned. Water barrels grew lighter by the hour. We were trapped. I remember standing on deck, squinting at the horizon, and feeling the strangest thing: silence. Real silence. No gulls, no waves, not even the groan of wood. Only the faint rasp of breath and the distant clink of metal as someone adjusted a buckle or knife. It felt wrong, like the world had been emptied and we hadn't yet realized it. Vanos remained on the quarterdeck most of the time, staring at nothing, his hand always near his coat where that small black journal was tucked. He barely spoke. When he did, it was in short commands: ration the water, secure the cargo. No lights at night, but I saw the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was watching. The chest, that cursed thing we'd taken from the San Erasmo, sat in the hold, chained and sealed, yet every man aboard felt its presence. They avoided that part of the ship as if it exhaled something they could smell but not name. Harp was the first to say it out loud. "It's the relics," he whispered one night. "They've brought the calm. Relics don't change the wind," I said. He stared at me, his eyes bloodshot and fevered. "Maybe not the kind of wind you can see." On the third night, the dreams began. Men woke screaming, drenched in sweat, claiming to have heard voices whispering their names. Soft, low, as if spoken through water. One swore he saw someone standing at the foot of his hammock, dripping wet, eyes like dark glass. Even I wasn't spared. I dreamed of the chest opening by itself, of gold spilling out, not in coins, but in teeth. And when I woke, I could still smell the faint sweetness of rot. By morning, 2 men were missing. Their hammocks were empty, their boots still beside them. No one had seen them go, but there was a single wet footprint near the companionway. One step, leading toward the deck, and then nothing. The crew began to whisper the word no sailor ever wants to hear: jinx. Vanos heard it too. He called the men together under the blazing sun. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. "You think the seas cursed us?" he asked, his voice hard and cold. "You think a box of bones commands the wind?" No one answered. He slammed his hand down on the rail. "We've faced storms that could crush mountains, fought ships with twice our guns. And now you tremble because the air's quiet, still silence. Then Harp spoke softly, but enough for all to hear. It's not the quiet we fear, Captain. It's what comes after. Venos's gaze fixed on him for a long time. Then he turned and walked below deck without a word. That night I couldn't sleep. The ship creaked in ways it hadn't before, slow, drawn-out groans like something shifting deep inside her. I went to the hold, drawn by some foolish instinct. The air there was thick, unmoving. The lantern light flickered weakly, and in that half-dark, the chained chest seemed to pulse, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Then, faintly, I heard it, a sound from inside. Not metal, not wood, softer, like breath. I stepped closer, holding the lantern high. The chains rattled, though the ship was still. And then 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, from within. My throat went dry. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the light. Footsteps echoed behind me. Vanos emerged from the shadows, the journal in his hand. "You heard it too," he said. It wasn't a question. "What is it, Captain?" I asked. He exhaled, slow and steady. "A promise. One the Spanish tried to keep locked away." He knelt, touching the chest gently, almost tenderly. "This," he murmured, "is the reason empires drown." He looked up at me then, eyes brighter than the lantern flame. "Do you know what's inside, Mateo?" I shook my head. "A piece of the crown's madness," he said. "Something they stole from the New World and called divine." He stood and handed me the journal. "Read," he said. Inside were sketches, maps of islands I'd never seen, notes in Spanish and Latin, and one phrase written in Venos's own hand, "El Corazón del Mar," the heart of the sea. I turned the page. There was a drawing, a heart, black and strange, bound in iron. Venos's voice dropped to a whisper. "The priest said it was a relic from the beginning of time, that it grants dominion to whoever owns it. But every man who's carried it," he paused, "every one of them vanished." Before I could speak, a scream cut through the ship. We raced to the upper deck. The crew was gathered at the rail, staring overboard. The water, once flat and dead, now rippled faintly. A slow, steady pulse, as though something massive moved beneath the surface. Then came the smell, sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in the sun. The sea was bubbling, tiny circles spreading outward, faster and faster. And then, without warning, the wind returned, all at once. The sails snapped, the masts groaned, and the Marian lurched forward. Men shouted, grabbing ropes and rails. The calm was broken, but the price, though we didn't yet know it, had already been paid. Below deck, unseen, the chest gave one last echoing knock. This time it didn't stop. The wind had returned, but it was no ordinary wind. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't playful. It roared through the rigging like a living thing, twisting the sails, tearing at ropes, and carrying a smell of salt, decay, and something faintly metallic, the taste of fear. The men scrambled, shouting over the storm. I clung to the mainmast, watching the water churn beneath us. It had changed. The calm glass was gone. replaced by rolling swells that seemed too deliberate, as if the sea itself were shaping them with a mind of its own. Harp cursed under his breath. I've never felt a wind like this, not even in the hurricane off Hispaniola. Vanos stood at the quarterdeck, coat flapping, eyes narrowed against the sheets of rain that lashed his face. He didn't move to give orders, didn't shout. He just watched, waiting. It was as though he knew what the storm wanted, and he was patient enough to let it speak first. The chest in the hold rattled again. Chains clanged. Men below deck yelled in alarm, thinking the hull itself was coming apart. But when Vanos finally descended, the chest sat still. Only a faint warmth emanated from it, like a heartbeat pressed into iron. By nightfall, the storm had escalated. The Marion rolled violently. Waves crashed over the rails, drenching men and cargo alike. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the deck in violent, stuttering bursts. The crew worked frantically to secure sails and barrels, voices hoarse from shouting over the roar. Then the water began to move differently. It rose beneath the ship, not in natural swells, but like columns, spiraling and twisting. Shadows formed in the depths, shapes too large to be ordinary fish, shapes that moved with purpose. I caught glimpses of them in the lightning. Massive, undulating forms, fins like scythes, eyes that reflected the flashes like lanterns. A scream cut through the storm. It was one of the men near the foremast. He'd been swept overboard. No one dared attempt a rescue. Not then. Not in those waters. The sea had become predator and judge, indifferent to our plight, yet intimately aware of our fear. Vanos's voice carried over the chaos. Hold fast. His eyes never left the horizon. I realized then he wasn't just watching the storm. He was reading it, speaking silently to the wind and waves. Harp grabbed my arm. Mateo, there's something wrong. This isn't natural. I nodded. I felt it too. The chest, the relics. Whatever cursed energy we had brought aboard had awoken something ancient. Something that had been sleeping in the depths, waiting for the foolish hands that dared steal what did not belong to them. Lightning struck closer now, illuminating a shadow that stretched across the water like a wall. It wasn't a wave. It was the shape of a ship, black and silent, riding atop the storm. No sails, no rigging, just a hull moving with terrifying grace. Vanos saw it before anyone else. He turned to us, his face pale but resolved. "Prepare yourselves," he shouted. "Whatever follows, we face together. This is the price of greed." Men scrambled to ready weapons, though nothing we carried felt sufficient. Pistols, cutlasses, and cannons. None of it seemed relevant against what was coming. And then the shadow moved closer, and the water itself seemed to lift in response, as if the sea were obeying a master we could not see. The first contact came with a sound that made the timbers of the Marion shudder. A low, reverberating hum, like the echo of a bell beneath water, multiplied 100-fold. The sea foamed and hissed, and shapes began to emerge. Enormous forms, dark as storm clouds, moving with unnatural speed. Tentacles, perhaps, or elongated shadows, brushing the ship's sides, thrumming the hull with power. I lost sight of the horizon. All I could see was the deck. Men clinging to whatever they could, faces twisted with terror and awe. Harp's fiddle was forgotten. He crouched by the mainmast, muttering prayers I didn't understand. Vanishing stood at the rail, sword in hand, staring down into the maelstrom. His voice carried, calm and commanding, even over the storm. Do not falter. Remember the articles. We are pirates, yes, but we are alive because we obey them. Hold to them now. And in that moment, a strange thing happened. The chest in the hold thumped once, then twice. The chains rattled violently, and the water below seemed to pull back, recoiling as if it had recognized authority, even amidst the chaos. A second later, lightning struck the water just off the starboard bow, illuminating a figure. Not human, not fully, but humanoid enough. Glimmering eyes, long dark hair floating as if underwater, arms reaching toward us. Its mouth opened, silent yet somehow articulate. The water around it boiled and hissed. Harp screamed, a sound so pure with terror it seemed to crack the air. I wanted to run, to jump overboard, to forget everything. But Vanishing's voice rang out again. Stand your ground. Do not show fear. We did not understand, could not understand, yet we obeyed. The Marian heaved against the swell, creaking like a living thing herself. The creature, whatever it was, circled us, testing, observing, waiting. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had become irrelevant. Only the pulse of the storm, the weight of the chest, and the cold, deliberate intelligence in the water mattered. When dawn broke, the storm abated as suddenly as it had begun. The shadow in the water vanished. The forms dissipated, leaving only the gentle lapping of waves against the hull, as though the night had been a dream. The calm that followed the storm was worse than the storm itself. The Marian drifted on a sea that seemed deceptively peaceful, but the crew no longer trusted it or each other. Men who had laughed, shouted, and fought together now looked sideways at one another. Whispers floated on the deck like smoke. Who would take what? Who would betray whom? Who had seen something in the water that no one else could explain? Every glance carried suspicion. Every laugh carried fear. Harp was the first to speak openly. We were gathered near the mainmast, still shaken from the previous night. We're all mad now, he said softly, his eyes hollow, voice trembling. Or we're close. Nothing that happened was natural. Nothing we've seen is something a man survives twice. The men muttered in agreement. Even the bravest pale-faced pirates avoided the hold. The chest, the heart of the sea, sat chained, innocuous yet impossible to ignore. Then came the first threat of mutiny. Dugan, our carpenter, had always been ambitious. After the storm, he began speaking in corners, whispering to anyone who would listen. The captain's gone soft, he said. We've brought the devil aboard, and he won't leave with the sunrise. It's ours for the taking, all of it. We don't need Vanishing to tell us what to do. First it was murmurs, then a few nodded, then, just as quickly, tension erupted into open confrontation. Vanishes gathered the crew on deck under the scorching sun. The sea lapped calmly against the hull, mocking the chaos that simmered above it. "Who here questions my command?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The men shifted uneasily. Dugan stepped forward, face red with sun and anger. "We've seen what you're carrying, Captain. Do you think we fear the sea? Fear what's in that chest? We fear nothing but losing it to your caution." The crew murmured in agreement. Vanishes didn't move. He let the words hang, heavy and sharp. Then he said simply, "Do you know what happens to men who seize what they do not understand?" Dugan laughed bitterly. "We'll find out." And the first blows were struck. The fight was chaos, a mix of desperation, fear, and raw survival instinct. Steel clashed, bodies fell, and the deck ran slick with blood and sweat. Vanishes moved with a precision that betrayed every battle he'd fought, every ship he'd raided. He disarmed men faster than they could swing. Yet for all his skill, the mutineers fought with reckless determination, emboldened by greed and terror. I stayed close to the rail, watching, heart hammering. Harp clung to the mainmast, muttering under his breath, eyes wide. By nightfall, only a few remained standing. Dugan lay at the waterline, unconscious but alive. Others had been thrown overboard during the struggle, claimed by the sea as easily as if it had been waiting for them. Vanishes didn't smile at victory. He merely wiped the blood from his hands, looking at the remaining crew with eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness of our souls. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "The sea does not care about men, nor do I, but the chest, it is not ours to command. Respect it, or it will consume you." Even as he spoke, a strange vibration ran through the hull. The men stiffened. A low, resonant hum seemed to rise from the hold, carrying with it the weight of the unknown. Harp whimpered, "It's waking again." Vanishes's face hardened. "Then we sail. We sail until it sleeps, or until we find the place it belongs." The next days passed under a fragile tension. Men moved silently, eyes darting to the chest, checking the water obsessively, and keeping a careful distance from each other. Some prayed, some muttered curses. None of us laughed, none of us sang, and still the sea watched. One night, as I climbed the mast to take a lookout shift, I saw a line of light on the horizon, faint but unmistakable. Another ship, gliding without wind. A silhouette I could not identify, yet its presence made the hair on my neck rise. Vanishes saw it too. He didn't shout. He only tightened his grip on the railing, jaw set. "They've come for it," he muttered. We spent hours preparing for confrontation, though we did not know what we would face. Cannonballs were loaded, swords sharpened, and the crew, silent and tense, waited. And then, from the darkness, a single figure appeared on deck. Not human, not fully. It was cloaked in mist, eyes glowing faintly, and it moved with a grace that was terrifying and deliberate. Harp whispered a name I did not understand. The men cowered. Even I, who had faced storms, mutiny, and monsters below the waves, felt a cold that I could not shake. Vanos stepped forward, unarmed, calm as ever. "You come for the chest," he said. The figure nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture. The air trembled. The sea itself seemed to lean in, holding its breath. And in that moment we understood. The journey had only begun. The chest, the storm, the sea, and now, something older than any of us. The price of greed, the curse of ambition, and the pull of the unknown had all converged on the Marianne. And there was no turning back. By the fourth day after the encounter with the shadow ship, the Marianne felt less like a vessel and more like a tomb adrift on a restless sea. The calm that followed the fog had given way to a heavy, oppressive heat. The sun beat down relentlessly, making the deck shimmer and warp in the distance. But it wasn't the sun or the salt that drained the life from the men. It was the chest. It had been moved to the center of the hold, surrounded by a circle of empty barrels to keep men at a distance. But no matter how far we tried to stay, its presence permeated everything. Shadows seemed darker near it. The air felt thicker, almost viscous, as if we were wading through it. Voices began to appear in the hold at night. At first, they were soft murmurs, indistinct, fleeting. Men swore they heard their names being called, only to find no one there. Then they began whispering things we could not understand, in languages none of us spoke. Harp, who had always been sensitive to the unseen, refused to enter the hold alone. Even Vanos, when he did, left quickly, muttering under his breath. I stayed close to the chest one evening, lantern flickering, curiosity stronger than fear. As I watched, I thought I saw the chains shift ever so slightly, as if something inside were moving, testing its bounds. A whisper rose above the sound of the waves, soft, almost coaxing. I leaned closer. "Mateo!" I froze. The voice was unmistakable. Low, melodic, impossible. It wasn't coming from the crew, nor from above deck. It came from the chest itself. My heart pounded, but I could not move. The voice whispered again, this time sharper, almost demanding. "Open, release, set me free." I stumbled back, breath shaking, lantern swinging wildly. The whisper faded, but the unease remained. Other men were not so lucky. Harp found Jenkins, one of the younger deckhands, muttering to himself near the hold. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated. "It speaks to me," Jenkins said, voice trembling. "It tells me what's mine, what belongs to me." Harp grabbed his shoulder. "No, boy, it doesn't belong to anyone." Jenkins pulled away, eyes glassy. "It does. I know it. I can hear it calling." He lunged for the chest. Harp barely restrained him, straining against the boy's sudden strength. Vanos arrived just in time, sword drawn. He shoved Jenkins to the deck and spoke slowly, coldly. "Do you want to join the men who disappeared overboard last week? The sea doesn't forgive folly. Neither do I." Jenkins whimpered, trembling, and Vanos ordered him confined until he regained his senses. That night, I lay awake in my hammock, listening. The whispers persisted, coming not from the chest, but from the shadows it cast. Men dreamed of impossible things. Endless corridors filled with gold, seas that boiled into fire, creatures rising from the deep, mouths filled with human teeth. I woke to the sound of someone crying silently. No one would admit to it, but I knew who it was. Vanishes rarely slept. He moved through the ship like a ghost himself, inspecting every rope, checking the hold, reading his journal by candlelight. He muttered calculations, measurements, strange symbols, as if trying to decipher a code we couldn't even imagine. Harp came to me quietly one morning. His fingers twitched nervously as he spoke. Mateo, I've heard them too. Whispers, promises. They aren't just voices. They're temptations. Every man aboard has heard them, but some listen more than they should. I asked him what he meant. He looked out at the water, pale and hollow. They show you what you want most. Gold, power, revenge, anything. And if you reach for it, they take more than you ever imagined. By the seventh day, the crew had begun to fracture. Small arguments exploded into fights. Men refused to eat. Some cursed the chest openly. Others knelt beside it in quiet reverence, muttering prayers or bargains to powers we could not name. The first man truly lost to it was Morgan, our gunner. He had been the calmest, most reliable of the crew. But one night, he crept into the hold with a lantern. I saw him at the corner of my eye, speaking to the chest. His voice was soft, pleading. The next morning, he was gone. No struggle, no cry, nothing. Just the wet imprint of a boot by the companionway and the faint smell of iron. Vanishes did not curse him. He did not search for him. He only shook his head quietly and said, "Those who are taken are not lost. They are given. The chest decides who is worthy and who is not." The rest of us grew silent. We avoided the hold, avoided the chest, avoided each other. Paranoia seeped in like water through a rotten hull. Every shadow, every creak, every whisper became a threat. I began to understand what Harp meant. It wasn't just madness. It was seduction. The chest promised everything a man desired, but the cost was more than we could pay. And yet none of us could leave it. Vanishes came to me late that night, leaning against the rail under a pale moon. His eyes were unreadable, but I caught a glimmer of something rare. Concern. "You've seen it," he said quietly. "I have," I admitted. He nodded. "It tests us all. But remember this, Mateo. Strength is not in resisting temptation alone. Strength is knowing the difference between what the chest wants you to see and what is real." I swallowed hard. I did not know if I had the strength. That night, the whispers returned louder than ever. Men slept fitfully or not at all. Shadows seemed to move closer to the hold, waiting, patient. And the chest, the heart of the sea, pulsed faintly in the darkness, as if it knew the fear it had sown. By the 8th night after the chest's awakening, the Marian carried an air of silent terror. The sea had begun to change around us, no longer merely a medium for travel, but a sentient observer, reacting to every whisper, every tremor of fear. It started with small signs. The water beneath the hull shimmered in unnatural colors. green, then black, then a faint silver glow, moving like living ink. Shadows twisted beneath the ship, forming shapes that resembled hands or claws or faces contorted in silent screams. No one spoke of it openly. Even Venos's expression remained unreadable. But the crew knew, instinctively, that something ancient and wrathful had been awakened. Harp refused to play his fiddle anymore. He barely touched his instrument, muttering prayers instead. Some men tried to laugh, attempted conversation, but the chest cast its influence even through the tiniest act of defiance. Fear had become a fog thicker than any the sea could conjure, and it clung to us all. Then it struck. It was near midnight. I had been sitting near the rail, listening to the wind whisper through the rigging, when a cry erupted from the hold. Venos and I raced below deck, hearts hammering, only to find Dugan, the man who had first incited mutiny weeks before, huddled against the wall, eyes wild, clawing at the chains around the chest. "It's calling," he shrieked. "It wants me. It will take me if I do not give it to it." Harp tried to calm him, laying a hand on his shoulder, but Dugan lunged, striking blindly. The chains rattled violently, the chest quivering as though in response. Suddenly, the lanterns flickered and went out. The hold plunged into darkness. A sound erupted from the chest, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through our bones. I stumbled backward, catching the wall, while the others screamed. Then the shadows moved. They surged from the chest, twisting along the floorboards, rising like smoke but solid enough to strike. They clutched at Dugan, lifting him off the deck with invisible hands. His screams tore through the hold, echoing in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. Dugan was gone. No body, no trace. Only a wet, dark stain spreading across the floor where the shadows had clutched him. Men stared, frozen. Even Venos did not speak at first. He knelt before the chest, tracing the iron with a fingertip, silent, calculating. Finally, he said quietly, almost to himself, "This is the first test. The chest does not kill recklessly. It judges, and it found him wanting." The crew recoiled, some shaking with fear, others muttering prayers. Harp's voice trembled as he muttered, "It's real. It's all real. It's not just whispers anymore." But the horror had only begun. The shadows didn't remain confined to the hold. That night, strange shapes appeared on deck, glimmers of movement at the edge of lantern light, shadows that didn't match the men who cast them, fingers of darkness reaching for ropes, for masts, for anything living. Sailors swore they saw figures rising from the sea itself, glimpses of humanoid forms with faces too twisted to be human. The wind roared, pulling the ship toward an unseen current. The waves rose unnaturally, curling around us with teeth-like crests. Men clutched the rails, trying to keep the ship steady, but it was as if the sea itself conspired against us. Venos stood at the quarterdeck, sword in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. "Steady," he barked. "Hold to the wheel. We do not falter." Harp muttered beside me, pale-faced, hands gripping the railing. "It's not the wind, it's not the sea. It's inside us now." And he was right. I could feel it too. A pull, subtle at first, then undeniable. As if the chest whispered to my mind, probing my fears, offering visions of power, gold, and dominion if only I gave in. We sailed through the night, trapped between waves and shadows, with no sign of dawn. Every creak of timber, every flapping sail, every gasp of a terrified man seemed magnified into a portent of doom. By the time the first pale light of morning touched the horizon, the Marian bore the scars of the night's assault. Rigging shredded, sails torn, deck stained with sweat, blood, and fear. But the chest remained chained and intact, inert now, as if it had spent its energy testing the crew and withdrawing. Vanishes gathered us on deck, face grim. "This is what I warned you of," he said. "The chest does not forgive recklessness. It does not reward courage. It measures, it judges, and every night it will test us again." Harp's voice, barely above a whisper, carried across the deck. "How much can any man endure before the chest takes him too?" Vanishing looked at me then, eyes steady. "As long as we sail with it, Matteo, we are bound to its will. But we are alive. For now." The Marian continued eastward, the chest at its center, the sea around it alive with silent, unseen threats. And somewhere beneath the waves, a power older than time itself waited patiently for the next mistake, the next moment of weakness. The first curse had been unleashed, and it was hungry. We had sailed nearly a week after the shadows emerged from the chest before anything resembling hope, or perhaps curiosity, arrived. It was not a storm, nor a calm. It was a ship, small but swift, approaching from the east, cut from black wood that gleamed under the moonlight like a blade. Her sails were dark, trimmed in red, and she moved as if gliding, untouched by the wind. Harp spotted her first, squinting from the crow's nest. "Matteo, look," he muttered. She's following us." Vanishing took the spyglass, his jaw tightening. "No flags, no markings I recognize. Could be a corsair, or worse. Keep watch. Do not fire unless I command it." The ship drew closer, and a sense of familiarity pricked at the edge of my mind. Something about her lines, the elegance of her build, the rhythm of her approach. It was uncanny. Then I saw her standing on deck, a silhouette outlined by lantern light, poised like a hawk ready to strike. "Isabella." I blinked, certain my eyes betrayed me, but Vanishing's expression confirmed it, recognition mixed with caution. She had been gone from the Caribbean for nearly a year, vanished after rumors of her capture by Spanish forces and whispered tales of her dealings with the supernatural. Yet here she was, alive, commanding a ship that seemed born from shadow and smoke. She raised a hand in greeting, and Vanishing lowered his spyglass slowly, expression unreadable. "Captain Vanishing," she called across the water, voice carrying like wind through the rigging. "I thought you might need guidance." Guidance. The word sent a chill down my spine. I had sailed with Vanishing long enough to know that he rarely sought help. And yet, Isabella's appearance suggested knowledge of something we had yet to understand, something connected inevitably to the chest. Venosa's response was measured. Isabella, you come at a curious hour. Speak plainly. Her figure moved gracefully along the deck of her ship, lantern light revealing the glint of a blade at her side. You carry a burden, a relic that should never have left Spanish hands. The chest, she said, voice low but firm, holds more than gold or bones. It holds the key to something older than empires, older than the sea itself. I swallowed, recalling the whispers, the shadows, the horror of the previous night. What do you mean? I asked. She looked toward the horizon, eyes distant. The chest chooses its bearers, tests them, and feeds on what it senses inside their hearts. Ambition, greed, fear. It amplifies them, and it is not alone. Forces older than man's memory wait for it, waiting for the moment it falters or is misused. Harp, standing beside me, whispered, I knew it. I felt it in the whispers. The chest is alive. Yes, Isabella said, turning her piercing gaze to the Marianne. And you have awakened it fully. The shadows, the storms, the madness. That is only the beginning. Venosa's face darkened. Then you will tell me what it wants, how to contain it, or we all die. Isabella's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained stern. Contain it? No, you cannot. Only survive it. Only endure long enough to reach the place where it belongs. And there is a cost. I felt the tension ripple through the crew. A cost, Harp muttered. What cost? She stepped closer to the railing, voice low, almost a whisper, carried only by the wind. The chest demands loyalty, cunning, and sacrifice. Every crew who has dared carry it has lost more than they bargained for. Friends, lives, souls. Some never even reach the end of their voyage. Venosa placed a hand on the rail, jaw set. Then we must sail. We must endure. Tell us the route, Isabella, or step aside. She regarded him carefully, the shadows from her ship casting her face half in darkness. I will guide you, but know this. The journey will show you truths that no man wishes to see, and it will reveal the heart of those who think themselves strong. Some will break, some will vanish, and some may awaken to what lies beneath. I felt a shiver creep along my spine. She spoke as though she had sailed this path before, as though she had seen the chest's judgment firsthand. And in her eyes, I glimpsed a knowledge that chilled me to my core. Isabella was not just returning to assist. She had a purpose tied to the chest's secrets, perhaps a debt to it, perhaps a bond we could not yet comprehend. Venosa nodded once. Then lead. But we do this on my ship under my command. The chest stays with us. She inclined her head slightly, a small smile touching her lips. As you wish, but remember, Captain, even you cannot control it. Only endure. And with that, the two ships sailed side by side into the unknown, the chest at the heart of our vessel pulsing faintly, almost expectantly, as if aware that its journey had grown more perilous, and more entwined with those who dared to carry it. The night deepened. The wind carried salt and whispers, and shadows beneath the water twisted and writhed as though observing, testing, waiting. For the first time since I had boarded the Marianne, I realized fully that the true danger was not the sea, nor the storms, nor even the cursed relic. It was what the chest reflected in men's hearts, and we were about to see it in full. By the 11th day, the sea had carried us to the edge of what the maps called nothing. The horizon stretched in endless gray blue, interrupted only by a faint smudge, a silhouette of land that seemed to rise from the mist like a phantom. The men murmured among themselves, uneasy, sensing what I already felt. This was no ordinary island. Vanishes kept the chest in the hold, chained and silent, yet its presence was palpable even above deck. Its weight seemed to draw the attention of the sea and the skies alike. The wind had shifted to a steady, eerie calm, and the waves lapped softly against the hull, deceptively gentle. Harp pointed toward the mist-covered landmass. It isn't on any map I've seen, he said, voice trembling. It's like the sea swallowed it and forgot. Isabella stood near the bow, gaze steady, eyes narrow. Few have reached this place, she said. Those who do rarely return, and those who do are not the same. Vanishing nodded, his hand brushing the railing. Then we must be careful. No rash steps. The island holds knowledge or danger or both. Keep watch, all of you. As we approached, the water grew strange beneath the hull. Shadows moved just below the surface, larger than anything natural. Dark shapes twined around the ship, brushing the sides with soft pressure, almost caressing. The men murmured prayers, clutching cutlasses and pistols as if these could ward off unseen monsters. The landing itself was treacherous. The shore was not sand, but jagged black stone, slick with moss that glimmered faintly under the moonlight. Waves crashed violently, breaking on the rocks, but the sea immediately calmed as if it had been testing us before allowing the ship to approach. Vanishing lowered the longboats. "We go in pairs," he ordered. "No one strays. The island is alive. It watches. It listens." I joined him, harp at my side, Isabella taking the lead. As we rowed through shallow water, a strange mist swirled around us, carrying scents of salt, decay, and something else. Something metallic, like iron and blood. My chest tightened. The closer we got, the more oppressive it became, as if the island exhaled judgment. The moment we stepped onto solid ground, a shiver ran through me. The island was silent, too silent. No birds, no insects, no sound but the distant crash of waves on rocks. The trees were twisted, blackened, and thick with moss that seemed almost alive, moving faintly in ways no wind could explain. Isabella stopped and crouched, pointing to the ground. Strange symbols had been etched into the stones, deep, deliberate, glowing faintly as if freshly carved. "These are warnings," she said quietly. "They tell of those who came before, who carried the chest, and of those who failed. Some were consumed by the sea, others by the shadows of the island. Few survived, and none stayed the same." Vanishing ran a hand over one of the carvings. reading it slowly. "We are being watched," he said, "and this place tests more than courage. It tests desire, greed, and fear." I felt the chest's pulse even here, far below deck, as if it were aware we had reached land. It hummed faintly, vibrating through the hull, sending tremors through my bones. We moved inland carefully. Each step seemed to echo unnaturally, and shadows twisted in ways that didn't correspond with our lanterns. Occasionally, we glimpsed shapes among the trees, humanoid, or at least humanoid in outline, but they vanished whenever we tried to approach. Harp whispered, voice barely audible. "It's like the forest itself is alive, watching us, waiting." Suddenly, Isabella held up a hand. "Stop!" We froze. Ahead, in a clearing bathed in pale moonlight, stood the remnants of an old settlement. The structures were skeletal, blackened wood and stone, collapsed in places, yet some walls still bore symbols similar to those on the ground. And in the center, partially buried in soil and moss, was a statue. A carved figure of a humanoid, face blank, holding a chest-like object against its chest. Vanishes crouched beside it, brushing moss away. "These were guardians," he muttered, "or warnings, perhaps both. The chest has been here before, or others like it." Harp shivered. "And the people?" Vanish's expression darkened. "Taken by the chest, or destroyed by it, we cannot know, but we must learn what it wants and why it returns to this place." As we explored the island, the forest seemed to close in, shadows lengthening unnaturally, the air thickening. Every noise sounded amplified. A snapped branch, a rustle of leaves, until it felt as though the island itself was breathing around us. The first night on the island was restless. Even in the small camp we set, men refused to sleep, eyes darting toward every movement. Whispers echoed faintly in the trees, carrying voices none of us recognized, voices that seemed to speak our names. And all the while, the chest, deep below deck, pulsed as if celebrating our arrival, or perhaps warning us of what was to come. By the next dawn, I realized fully that the island was more than land. It was a trial, a labyrinth, and a judge, and it would not release us until it had seen the strength or the weakness of every soul aboard the Marianne. The journey inland had only begun, and already I understood one terrifying truth. This was not merely an island of the lost. It was a crucible, and we were the metal to be tested. The forest began just beyond the camp, a tangled mass of blackened trees whose trunks twisted skyward like the arms of pleading spirits. Shadows clung to the ground and draped themselves across the branches, moving with a slow, deliberate life of their own. Even in the pale light of dawn, it felt as though the forest was breathing, waiting, aware of every step we took. Vanish's led the way, sword in hand, while Isabella walked beside him, her own blade sheathed but ready. Harp stayed close to me, trembling, muttering half-formed prayers to gods who might not exist. Every man felt the forest's weight pressing down, the air thick with damp and the faint tang of iron. The chest pulsed faintly in the hold, and though we were far from the ship, its presence was a tether we could not ignore. It seemed to whisper across the miles, sending images and feelings that were not our own: greed, longing, guilt. The first vision struck Harp. He screamed suddenly, clutching his head, staggering backward into a gnarled tree. The bark seemed to writhe beneath his fingers as he fell, and his eyes rolled back, seeing something that only he could perceive. "They're here. They want me," he cried. Vanos caught him, steadying him with firm hands. "What do you see?" Harp's voice was barely audible. "Gold, endless treasure, and them. Faces in the water, faces I know. I've lost them, and they call to me. They call me to join them." Isabella knelt beside him, whispering words I could not hear, and slowly, his terror subsided, replaced with a pale, quivering awareness. "The forest shows what you desire most," she said, voice steady. "It tempts you, Matteo, all of you, and if you give in, it consumes you." I felt it too. The trees seemed to lean closer, shadows curling around me, suggesting not danger but opportunity. Whispers slithered into my mind. Visions of power, command, riches beyond imagining. The chest's pulse had grown insistent, aligning with the forest's rhythm, as though the two had formed a pact to test our resolve. The path narrowed as we pressed deeper, roots tangled like serpents, pulling at our boots, snaring hands that lingered too long. Strange flora glimmered faintly in colors impossible to describe, petals that seemed to breathe, leaves that moved against the wind. And through it all, the whispers persisted, soft, coaxing, insistent. One of the sailors, young and reckless, faltered. He had been silent until now, but the vision struck him with force. He dropped to his knees, hands pressed to his face, screaming in terror. Faces of fallen crew, of loved ones long dead, rose from the mist and the shadows, reaching for him. Vanos struck the man lightly, snapping him from the hallucination. "Focus," he barked. "These are not real. These are temptations. They are shadows made to test your mind, not your body." The forest did not relent. Each step forward brought new illusions. Islands of gold rising from the mist, monstrous creatures looming from nowhere, voices promising untold knowledge or warning of impossible doom. Every man grappled with his own visions, some falling to their knees, some clutching weapons as if they could fight phantoms into submission. Isabella's presence was an anchor. She moved through the illusions as if untouched, calmly guiding us past the most seductive visions, whispering truths that cut through the forest's lies. "Do not look for what is promised," she said. "Look for what is real. Only the real will guide you through." Even Vanos was not immune. I saw him pause, jaw tight, eyes fixed on a vision of the Marianne, perfect and untouched, her sails golden under sunlight, crew laughing and carefree. His grip on the sword tightened, as if he were restraining himself from stepping into a fantasy that promised peace, yet mocked the peril we endured. Hours passed in this manner, though time itself seemed distorted. A step that took moments felt like an eternity. The forest shifted, and the shadows deepened with the coming night. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Laughter, whispers, distant cries. And the closer we came to the center of the forest, the louder the chest pulsed, as if calling us home, pulling at our fears and desires simultaneously. Finally, we reached a clearing, circular, lined with stones carved with ancient symbols. The moonlight fell here uninterrupted, and for the first time, the forest seemed to pause, holding its breath. The whispers were no longer soft. They pressed against our minds, urging, demanding, testing the limits of our sanity. Vanos stepped forward, sword raised, eyes scanning the shadows. "Here we are," he said, "the forest's heart. Step carefully. One false move, and it will take you." Isabella knelt beside one of the stones, tracing symbols with her fingers. "This is the place where the chest was first brought ashore," she said, "where its power first touched land, and where many have failed before you. This is a crucible, and only those who resist can pass." I felt the chest's pulse in my mind like a drumbeat, stronger now, faster. Each thump was a challenge, an accusation. Do you desire it? Do you fear it? Do you belong here? Harp clutched my arm. "Matteo, I don't know if I can resist it." I swallowed hard. "We have no choice," I whispered. "We endure. That's all we can do."